Alright guys, so for the warm-up, I do not want you guys to write down the questions. You guys can write down just the answers, okay? Okay. Explain the role of the consumer within the free enterprise system. Okay, so who's the consumer and what is their role within the free enterprise system? Okay? Think about it for about a minute and then I want you guys to talk about it with your groups, okay? Alright guys, so what is the role of the consumer within the free enterprise system? Let's go ahead and have that conversation now with your guys' group partners, and then we'll talk about it in a class, as a class in about a minute. Let's go. Okay, guys, attention back up here, please. So explain the role of the consumer within the free enterprise system. Okay, so real quick, who's the consumer? We are, right? Okay, we are the consumers. So, with that being said, Andy, can you explain what one of the potential roles of a consumer is in the free enterprise system? Okay. All right. Well, let's ask around. Ask your guys. Ask Serenity or somebody else in your group to talk about it.
People will pay for products and services.
Huh?
That's what it is. People will pay for products and services.
You gave me what the consumer does. Okay, but you told me what they do. So what is that?
People buy products and services.
Okay, so they buy products and services. Okay, what are the other roles within the free enterprise system that the consumer has? Okay, Rosalind, what's another role that the consumer has within the free enterprise system?
Well, they decide on what to spend and what not to spend.
So they decide what they're going to spend on, right? Okay, perfect.
So get interest.
And get interest?
Give interest. Or like create interest for the business people.
Create interest, like interest rates? For...
Yeah, they tell them what to sell.
Oh, okay, so they tell them what to tell, what is selling. Okay, guys, so what Faith was saying is the consumer is telling the businesses what is selling. Okay? By doing, guys, so by the consumers buying whatever it is that they're buying, we are telling the producer that is what's selling, okay? All right, compare and contrast government involvement in the economies of America and Mexico. Again, I want you guys to think about it for about a minute, and then we'll talk about it, okay? So what are the differences between the government involvement in America and in Mexico within the economy? Alright guys, go ahead and have the conversation with your group now about the differences. I want you guys to compare and contrast government involvement in the economies of America and Mexico. About a minute to talk with your groups and then we'll talk about it as a class, okay? about this, alright? Let's get some conversation going about this.
No, last Friday. But I'm telling you, those are like that.
Let's get some conversation going about this, I guess. Huh? It was in the textbook in 3.1. Alright guys, attention back up here please. Okay. So compare and contrast government involvement in the economies of America and Mexico. Let's hear from a couple of people. Let's go with let's go with Roberto.
Honestly, I don't know.
You don't know? Okay. So have you ever been to Mexico?
Yes, every year.
Okay. So what is something that you might see in Mexico that you don't necessarily see a whole lot of here in the US?
Like open markets, just like that, all over the place.
Open market, so there's a lot of street vendors?
Yeah.
Okay, so what would that potentially be doing?
Creating like competition.
Creating competition? Why do you think they might be selling on the streets rather than opening up their own business?
Cause it's cheaper.
It's cheaper. Let's think about that more about the government side. Okay, if they're choosing to just sell on the streets rather than go through all the paperwork to build their own business.
Oh, they like ignore the government, kind of.
What's that?
They kind of ignore the government.
They're ignoring the government, okay? Any other things? Let's go with Daniela. Ask somebody in your group if you need to. Guys, pay attention, please. Can somebody in her group help her out? What's a way that the American government is involved within our economy?
The American. Wait, what is that? Repeat that a little bit more.
So compare and contrast government involvement in the economies of America and Mexico.
Okay, so Mexico, like they basically kind of just do like their own little markets. They do like street vendors because so they don't have to pay like their taxes to the government.
Okay.
However, here like there's like small businesses, and like we pay our taxes to the government because of that. Like we abide by the rules, while Mexico doesn't.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Let's make sure we pay attention. Okay. All right, guys. So what Rosalind said was that in Mexico they're selling a lot more of the street on the street stuff, street vendors, because they aren't necessarily paying the taxes that they are having to sell, that they are having to pay. Okay. In the U.S., we have to pay taxes no matter what. Okay, we're paying taxes on anything that any kind of income that we're getting. Okay? Alright, so now we're going straight into the lecture. This is 3.1. Just a reminder, guys, anything that's green, you guys need to write down. Anything that's red, you do not need to write down, but it's still important to know. How does free enterprise allocate resources? It's 2.2. Okay. So the role of the consumers. Okay. Real quick, who are the consumers again? We are. All right. One of our biggest roles is that we buy product. We're buying the products for personal use. Okay? Anything that we're buying for our own personal use. If somebody were to buy coffee, how might that coffee be considered personal use?
Yes,
The drink.
Huh?
The drink.
It's a drink. Rosalind, you guys were saying something?
yes, energy.
Energy? Okay. Perfect. Okay. Going back to 3.1 from last week, we're voting about success. We're voting for successful businesses with our wallets. Okay. Can anybody remind me what voting is? Okay. Let's call somebody. Mariah, can you give me an example of what voting was? You weren't here for last week? Okay. Andrea? Do you know what the voting is?
Buying stuff.
Buying stuff? Okay. So when we vote, we're voting with our wallet, okay? We're buying whatever it is that we choose. Guys, quit the talking. There's too much talking while I'm talking, okay? Let's cut it out. Alright. So, when we vote, we're voting for successful businesses with our wallets. Okay? We are going with our choice over the competition, which is the other the other products that we are choosing not to buy. Okay? Okay, the information or these votes are determining what can be produced in the future. Okay, like I was saying earlier, the companies are not going to be producing stuff that isn't selling, right? Every vote that we send in, with it being something that we're buying, is showing the businesses what it is that we are wanting, what they are needing to produce. Okay? And then, as consumers, we're always looking for the cheapest products out there. Okay? We aren't going to go and buy the most expensive product out there if we can find it for cheaper somewhere else. It's all about saving money for us. And guys, finally, it matters where you spend your dollar. Okay? Have you guys ever heard of Mr. Blocker talking about Walmart as being the evil empire?
No.
You guys have never heard Blocker talk about that?
No.
Okay, so Blocker refers to Walmart as the evil empire. Does anybody give me an example as to maybe why? Save money, live better? Okay, so perfect. Okay? So Walmart, up until last year of October, they didn't offer any benefits for their employees.
Oh wow.
Okay? In the middle of a pandemic, they didn't offer any benefits for their employees. No health insurance, no medical insurance, none of that stuff, okay? To put this into perspective, the owner of Walmart, Sam Walton, makes $70,000 a minute. Okay? So guys, knowing that Sam Walton makes $70,000, a minute, why is it that just until last year, about 4 months ago, they didn't have any benefits for their employees?
Because he was selfish and didn't care about them.
Okay, right? People are selfish.
What does that matter?
Okay, so it matters where we spend our money. Okay. All right. Role of producers. Okay. Just like consumers always are looking for the cheapest product, producers are naturally seeking profits. Everything that the producer is doing is they're doing it so that they can make the most profit possible. Okay. Producers, guys. Producers will charge as much for their products as the consumer will pay. The producers are going to charge as much as for their products as the consumer will pay. Okay? So, why does Starbucks charge $6 for a cup of coffee, guys? Because it's good. And how much is it? It's $5? Okay.
It depends what you order.
Okay. Well, let's just go with $5 then. Why does Starbucks charge $5 for a cup of coffee?
Just because it has the logo that's from Starbucks.
It's the ingredients being put in the
Okay. So, do you think it costs them $5 to make that one cup of coffee?
No, it costs them probably like $1 something.
It probably costs them much less than that. They charge the $5 because they know that the consumers are going to pay for it. Okay, I heard somebody on that side of the room talk about that. Okay?
Because like Mr. X, okay, if you think about it, Starbucks sells, say you go to Walmart and they sell like that little bag that you can brew at home.
Hold on a second.
Like $5.
Hold on a second. Guys, Serenity's speaking. Alright?
Okay, this is my point, Mr. X. Starbucks sells that little coffee bag, right?
Okay.
Like max $10. We can get a bunch of like cups of coffee. So how much do you think it costs them to make like an espresso or something?
Exactly.
A little bit, but since it says Starbucks on it, then they're gonna obviously charge you. 'Cause
Right.
It's from Starbucks.
So, that too. There are some producers where you're literally just paying for the name. Okay? If Dutch Bros knows that they can charge more than Starbucks, they're going to because they know that the consumers are going to pay for it. Regardless if they pay for it because they like it the way it tastes better, or if they just feel like it gives them more energy. Okay, so consumers see the company's profits and it urges them to create their own business. So we were talking about this last week. So based out of the free enterprise system, what is this an example of? Based out of your guys' notes from last week. Let's go ahead and think about it for about 30 seconds, and then we'll talk about it as a class for about a minute, okay? The free enterprise system. What specifically though? All right, guys. So, attention up here, guys. Okay. So consumers see the company's profits and it urges them to create their own businesses. Based off of what we were learning last week, what is this an example of? It's an example of free enterprise, but it's also an example of open opportunity. Open opportunity allows everybody that wants to the opportunity to get into the business sector, okay? And government role within capitalism. So the government is both consumer and producer, okay? Andy.
Wow.
Let's focus on these notes.
Let's concentrate. Okay. The government is considered a consumer because of the different contracts that we are signing out for. Okay? The government has contracts with the automotive industry, with the construction industry, and with the aviation industry. Those are just to name a few, guys. So, with the automotive industry, if we think about back to February of 2020, back when COVID was first starting, what was something that the government did to the automotive industry? They began signing contracts with them to stop the production of cars and start production of the PPE, which is protective equipment that is needed for COVID patients. Okay? They're also producers because they're building roads, different government buildings like schools that are used for public use, parks, pools. Any questions so far, guys? Okay. Allocation of resources. The process in which the business acquires their resources, okay? So, allocation of resources is a process in which the business acquires their resources, okay? Does anybody in here work? Anybody in here have a job?
Me?
Okay. What is your job?
I'm cashier.
Where do you work at?
Walmart.
You're a cashier at Walmart? Okay.
Or it's either that or I'm stocking things.
You're a stalker also?
Yeah. It just depends.
Okay.
Oh, she's a stalker, alright. Sorry. I couldn't resist. Sorry.
And then, was it Lizette? You raise your hand?
She works at Target.
Who else rose their hand?
Lily. Right?
Okay. So, each business is allocated a certain number of resources, okay?
By the way, one more time and say your fingers.
Each business is allocated a certain number of resources. Each business then has limits as to how much they can obtain. Okay? So, why might each business have limits? Let's go back to chapter 1 for a second. Why might each business have limits as to how much resources they might be able to obtain? Okay? Money, maybe, possibly. What about scarcity? Do you guys remember back to chapter 1 that every resource was scarce? Okay. This table's gonna move. This table's gonna move. No, this table's gonna move. And the allocation of resources also helps in the distribution of these resources, okay? Do you guys want, let's think about this as demand. Okay? Whatever it is, whatever building or company it is that is going to be ordering these resources knows that they need a certain amount of it, right? So what are they going to do? They're going to call up their suppliers and they're going to be like, we need this many, okay? We are having this much output being sold. This is what we need to ensure that we have enough resources for them, okay? So if Reedley Starbucks needs 60 cups, obviously they would need a lot more. I just used 60 because it was a fairly small number. They will order it from the corporate office. At that time, the corporate office is going to identify to see if they actually do need that number of cups. And at that point, they're going to send it out or send out the number that they believe they need. Okay, rather that be higher or lower the original 60. Allocation of resources. All right, guys, I'm going to give you guys probably about 2 minutes. I want you guys to copy this down in your notes. All right, if you guys aren't finished copying it down, let's go ahead and take a picture of it so we can. You guys have about 30 seconds left. Alright. So what is this an example of? Notice how it's not in red or green? So you guys do not need to write it down. In the early 2000s, there was a major trend in low carbs and high protein diets. Consumers began to fall in line with this dietary trend and began purchasing foods that aligned with this diet. What is this an example of? No, you guys do not need to write this down. Let's think about it for about a minute, and then we're going to talk about it, okay? What is this an example of? Alright, think about it. Okay, so people are still doing this, okay? But in the early 2000s, that's when it was the most popular. A fad trend still works. Okay, because that still works because it's, even though it's still going on, what's the newest dietary trend that everybody's going on? Right now, in my opinion, I would say keto. I hear more and more people talking about keto than I do hear about them talking about this. A fad trend, it's the same thing. Yeah.
Actually, am I getting better now? My parents are.
That's good. Just as long as you have the actual flow of how it goes. Alright guys, so let's go ahead and talk about it for about a minute. Talk about it with your groups. What is this an example of? Let's focus on your stuff and let's get this stuff done. Well, how about you? What's up? Yeah, go ahead. Let's focus on this. What's this an example of?
What's a trend?
Okay. Alright guys, so in the early 2000s there was a major trend in low carbs and high protein diets. Consumers began to fall in line with this dietary trend and began purchasing foods that aligned with this diet. What is this an example of? A fad?
Keto? What?
Possibly keto.
I know, bro.
Okay.
But that's okay.
Anybody else? Alright, I'm gonna start calling on people. Caesar? Let's think about it. What's another thing? It was fad. What was for I gave you guys an example for as kendamas. What was that? Do you guys remember?
It was just like a trend I know was doing.
It was a trend, right? Perfect. Alright. What else would this be an example of? We talked about it today. What else might this be an example of? Guys? Alright, so let's go ahead and call on Robert. What might this be an example of out of your notes from today?
Let me check. It'd be like the boats. I'm not thinking something.
What was that? What was that, Robert?
The boats.
Boats?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, guys. So Robert said boats. Can anybody explain to me why boats is also an example of this?
We're choosing it.
Huh?
We're choosing it.
You're choosing it. Perfect. So, fad, trend, and votes. Alright, also, again, you guys don't need to write this. I want to have a decent little conversation about this. How does free enterprise allocate its resources? Okay? Let's think about it for about 30 seconds to a minute, and then we'll talk about it as a class. Right. Alright, guys. Attention up here. Okay. So how might a company allocate its resources? Alright. Jaden? Yeah. By demand from the consumers? Okay. Go with Angel. Do you have any potential guesses as to how they might allocate their resources? Let's just take a guess. Let's take a guess. We already said demand, so it's demand from the consumers, right? Because the consumers are telling them what to buy. So what else might they do? Let's ask around somebody. Ask somebody in your group, and I'll come back to you. Okay? All right. Zach, what you think? What's in the example of this? Okay, why do you say supply and demand? Okay. So, why don't you go back and look at your notes, okay? Alright. So a business will look at the votes from consumers and use the data from their purchases to allocate the resources that they sell the most. Okay? Who was it that said demand? Perfect. Okay? Angel, did you think of something? Just take a guess. What do you think? Okay, so yeah, we are going to be buying supplies from them, right? So what is something that the company has to do in order to buy supplies? They have to sell that material, but they also have to be able to realize what supplies they need, right? Okay. So since all businesses seek profits, they are not going to be allocating the resources that are deemed unnecessary. Okay, these could be resources that are going to be put into products that do not sell well. They're only going to be allocating the resources that they need to sell the products that are going to be selling the most. Okay? Alright, so you guys got probably about 4 minutes. Let's go ahead and get those R notes and summaries done real quick and then show them to me as soon as you're done. Just a reminder that next week, PFP number 4 is due, or at the end of this week on Friday, PFP number 4 is due. It's 2 parts long. First part is going to be charts. The second part is going to be the reflection based off of the chart.
Are we gonna have a work day?
Huh?
Are we gonna have a work day?
I do not believe so. You guys had 2 weeks to get this done, guys. If you guys don't show me the our notes and summary by today, it's not getting accepted. I can check at I can check it. What was it that over mark? Did you get the picture quality done? Here it ends in about 2 minutes, guys. You guys have 2 minutes to get this done.
Just the art or the summary?
Both.
I don't know exactly how to do it. I would She called it out. See, that's carbon. Wait, is this all you have to do? Just draw the picture.
Exactly.
Hey, blusher! I win a Jeep.
How you win?
Yeah? Let's go. Let's go. Oh my god. She is. Andy is that poster. What? No, I think it's fake.
May I have your attention, please? Today, Disneyland ticket sales will be sold in the hallway of the Pirate Home. Again, may I have your attention? Disneyland tickets will be sold today in the Pirate Home hallway. Thank you.
picture of it. Okay, so take a picture of it. Make sure you draw just the chart and the flow of it. Okay. Make sure you highlight your R notes also.
Oh, Andy's in the mood. You good? Yeah. Democracy.
I'm gonna. Georgia's 18. I'm almost 18.
Okay, so for that, let's just go ahead and focus on what's in it. Okay, so like, what's something that you might eat at work? Ribeye steak?
Ribeye?
Dang, what kind of
Must be
what kind
nice.
of restaurant you work at
Okay,
that feed you
softball
ribeye
players,
steaks?
today's update for today's
I
game.
need to work at
JV
ribeye.
varsity softball at Kingsbury has been postponed and is rescheduled
Okay,
for
so
tomorrow,
what
Wednesday,
else is
February
served with the
23rd.
ribeye?
Again, attention softball
Okay,
players.
so at that point it would be,
Updates for today's game.
you
JV
label it as your
varsity
lunch,
softball
where you
at
got it
Kingsbury
from.
has been
And I would put that
postponed
you
and is
got
rescheduled
it
for tomorrow,
right to the
Wednesday, February 23rd.
And then what it was, and then obviously it's gonna be ribeye, and it's gonna be rice pilaf as part of it, and then anything else that was individualized in it, you would put into there. Now, I believe the instructions state just what you would buy. Okay.
So if I eat anything else but that, right?
I would use that, but look up the prices for that then, and add it as if you bought it.
In the
Okay.
restaurant?
Yeah.
Okay. Would that count as like eating out or like?
Yeah, that would count as eating out.
Did you cook it?
No, my dad did. Uncle Harry.
Uncle Harry's?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got
So
chef
get
there?
that open.
Yeah. I'm a waitress.
You're the waitress there?
Yeah. Bye.
See ya.
Alright, give me 1 second. Okay.
Siobhan.
May I have your attention, please? Lunch detention has been canceled for today and will resume tomorrow. Again, lunch detention for today has been canceled and will resume.